We've also got some other materials related to bicycling, like our bicycle level of stress map. We've also got the Texas Department of Transportation has got a brochure on how to research and find and track different projects that are being done by TxDOT. Okay?
So I'm going to follow up on what she was talking about with the master bike share plan. There's opportunity for people with all types of disabilities to get involved and give feedback to make that system in our community more accessible. So I've recently found that 2 of the bicycle stations that are located, I think, at the zoo and maybe the museum reach of the river, I think, actually have an accessible unit at those 2 bicycle locations. Do y'all know anything about that? Can y'all come talk about that? And so if we want to see more of those in our community, participating in surveys like the Bike Share Master Plan are the way that we're going to make things like that happen.
Oh, sorry about that. Can I take it out?
Yep, let's do that. That is a smarter plan.
So my name is Andrew McAllister, and I'm with the Believe It Foundation. And our mission is the inclusion of physically challenged kids with activities that typical cool kids get to do in their peers. And so what we've done with partnership with B-Cycle is we have put 2 adaptive bikes at B-Cycle locations, as was said earlier, at the zoo B-Cycle location and then at Roosevelt Park. And so there's a chair adaptive bike there called the Duet at both those locations, where you can have a physically challenged person ride in the front, and then an able-bodied person can pedal in the back. And then it disconnects into being sort of a wheelchair, so you can wheel it around and take the person to a picnic or something like that. And so right now we're doing a 6-month pilot program where you can sign up for a membership for a nominal fee, and you can try that out and ride around in that. So we're so grateful for B-Cycle and the opportunity to come out and share about that this evening. So thank you.
So issues with transportation don't just impact us where in getting around town and in getting to work and getting to school, but that they also impact the ways that we have recreation. Do y'all want to talk about San Antonio bike tours? Come on up. And then we'll get started with our panel discussion. That's much taller than I am. Cut him off at the knees.
That's one of those challenges. So we kind of wear 2 hats here. We're in the tourism industry, of course. We do guided tours of San Antonio. But what makes us a little bit different is we don't use traditional bicycles. We use tricycles, which we have a couple of them over here. And because tricycles are not terribly common with a lot of bike shops, and a lot of bike shops typically don't have people that really focus on adaptive uses of trikes. We also are a dealer for the TerraTrike line of trikes, and we work with folks who have various issues that prevent them from riding a traditional upright bike. In the last couple of years, we have worked with a group that supports people with multiple sclerosis and have supplied 22 trikes to people with MS, letting them get out and ride and be active. Last year at the MS 150, one of our recipients of a trike got out of his wheelchair, transferred to his trike, rode 2.5 miles on the MS 150. He had been an active bike rider prior to his diagnosis. So if you get an opportunity, stop by and visit us. We have one of our trikes set up with several different adaptive devices, grab bars that make it easier for people to get in and out of the trike, headrests, adaptive pedals that help keep the feet on the pedals. A number of different ways that make cycling accessible. And of course, the nice thing about a trike is people don't have to balance, and makes it quite nice. We even have a blind couple who the wife has some visual acuity. Her husband's totally blind. He rides on the back, she rides on the front. They do their errand running. They have a couple of kids. They pull a trailer and they haul their kids, and they go to the grocery store. They do a little recreational riding as well. So, and we do, like I said, we're in the tourism side. We also do guided tours of San Antonio. So if you have family coming in for the holidays and you want to get them out of the house, we'll be happy to take them and show them around San Antonio and give you a little bit of a break as well. Thank you all so much.
All right, so we're going to get started with our panel discussion. First of all, I am Melanie Coffin with DisAbilitySA, and we are a local nonprofit organization that works to connect individuals with disabilities with the resources in the community and make sure they have opportunity to engage fully in our local community. We are so pleased to be able to offer these Conversation 360s in partnership with the Brick here at the Blue Star Arts Complex. And tonight we are streaming compliments of Nowcast San Antonio and their support for getting the word out about these conversations and about how we can each impact the community and make it a better place to live for everybody in our community. So we are appreciative for their services tonight. And then we have deaf interpreter services here this evening, providing deaf interpreter services for individuals who need that aid. If you need assistance in reading or writing or any other type of assistance this evening, please let us know. We do have volunteers available to help with that because we want everybody to participate in the conversation. Now, on your way in, you should have gotten a survey for this evening. You should have received some index cards as well as a pen. We encourage everybody to write down their comments or their questions so that we can continue the conversation after today. So if it's not addressed in our public discussion, we can continue to address those concerns and issues and questions as we go along. So tonight, our facilitator is Sheila Black. She's with Gemini Inc., and she has graciously volunteered her time so that I can run around in circles in the back while we get this conversation started. She has edited a wonderful book of poetry about people with disabilities and by people with disabilities called, forgive me, Beauty is a Verb. And it's a wonderful compilation and that I recommend. I've gotten it started in it. I received a copy, and it's a wonderful piece. So on that note, I'm going to bring her up. She's going to introduce our panelists. We'll introduce our exhibitors one more time afterwards, and then we'll break into small group discussions, which will be on navigating transportation if you are blind, accessible parking, and accessible transit. So I look forward to a wonderful and dynamic discussion with everybody this evening, and thank you for coming out and participating. We will be taking comments and questions from the viewers at home. So I may pop in or hand an index card off, and we'll get those included. And at that, Sheila Black. Sheila.
I'm going to move it way back just like a rock star because I don't know how to move it down. I'm very happy to be here tonight, and I think that this is an issue close to my heart. I was born with a disability called XLH, X-linked hypophosphatemia, which affects my mobility, and so I've always been keenly aware of the vital importance of access, and people with disabilities are the most recent population to get civil rights under the U.S. Constitution with the passage of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, in 1990. But we're still struggling with the question of access and how to gain full access. And transportation is a major nexus for that. Buses, trains, cars, parking, etc. So we're very lucky tonight to have two wonderful panelists. We have Rosa Villarreal, who's the Vice President of Transportation for VIA, and we have Chase Brearden, who's the Director of Advocacy and Community Organizing for the Austin-based Coalition of Texans with Disabilities. And we're really happy to have them, and I will let them get started.
Good evening. My name is Rosa Villarreal. I am the Vice President of Transportation for VIA Metropolitan Transit. And so what I do at VIA is I oversee the bus system. So we have two sides to our bus system. We have the fixed route side, the buses that are on a fixed schedule. And then we also have the paratransit side, which is curb-to-curb service for people who cannot navigate on the fixed route system. I also oversee the accessibility services part of VIA, and I'm pleased to have a couple of staff members here with me today. I've got David Frost sitting in the back, who's the manager of accessible services, and I've got another staff member coming, Sylvia Castillo, who oversees the paratransit operation. She's the manager over paratransit. I'm fairly new to VIA. I've been there a whole 7 months, but I come from Corpus Christi, where I was also overseeing the system there, Corpus Christi Regional Transportation Authority. So a little smaller than San Antonio, but been in transit for about 8 years now. So I'm really excited to be here with you and to share with you some of the exciting things that VIA is looking at for 2018. As you can imagine, we are seeing some growing trends, especially on the paratransit side, as our nation ages and more people are wanting their choices in transportation. We are tasked with providing those options for our community. Historically, the cost of paratransit service is high. I can transport someone on a fixed route bus for about $4 a person, versus on the paratransit side, it's something around $30 a person. And so you can imagine more people are applying for eligibility on the paratransit side. The people that are eligible are taking more trips. So as an agency, we are looking for innovative ways to deliver that service, provide great customer service for our riders, and at the same time watch that overall budget. So I'll tell you a little bit about some things after we do introductions that VIA is looking at in the coming years, and some pilot programs that are being tested throughout the country, and I'm really looking forward to some of those ideas coming to fruition here in San Antonio. So thank you again for having me.
Hello, my name is Chase Beard, and I'm the Director of Advocacy for the Coalition of Texans with Disabilities. We're a statewide policy advocacy organization. We've been around since 1978. I've been there for about 10 years. A lot of the work we do has been policy-driven, looking at transportation, civil rights, housing, education, all the things that make life worth living. I mean, you got to have all of these in your life. So our goal is working with legislators, it's working with state agencies, trying to come up with the ideas, the technology, and to ensure that they're following some of the basic rights of what we should be working on. A lot of times, legislators will go to create a policy about transportation, but not include the disability community. We try and find stakeholders to get involved. We try and get people to talk to their legislators, because they're the ones making a lot of these decisions. And if they don't hear from the community, then most of those decisions are being made by others. We try and get more people to serve on committees to ensure that voice is consistently there, and to work towards creating the most independent and accessible community across the state. With that, we try and really work a lot on making sure it's the same across the state, because I know a lot of times when you go to access something, when you leave Austin and you get to San Antonio, if things are different, if you don't know how to access, you don't know the groups to call, that can become a barrier in itself. So finding consistent transportation issues or access to hotels, making education. So we work towards creating some unity, and really look forward to talking tonight. We're going to kind of let you know what we know about pilot program that the transportation network companies will be moving forward with now that the new rules are out. A little bit about one project that I've been excited that we've gotten to work on a little bit is high-speed rail, and how they're looking at creating it completely accessible from the ground up. And it's not something that's a second thought, which that's been a hard part about transportation, is it's been around longer than the ADA, so most of the things were retrofitted. This is brand new. It'd be the first in the country, and they're doing it to where they're having a lot of participation and building truthfully from the ground up. After that, love to talk about accessible parking. It seems to be the biggest issue I ever hear about. And we're working towards trying to get legislators to improve that system and make it more effective and allow people to access all the businesses they can by it. So, how would you like to move forward?
You want to talk about some of the barriers and innovations that you see, or major why don't we start with major issues that are faced that create trouble with accessibility? And maybe you go in and...
Okay. So some of the things that we've seen in public transportation, so I think vehicles have come around. And so I don't know if you all remember back in the old days, fixed route buses were they were considered high floor. And so there was actually stairs to get on a fixed route bus. It wouldn't kneel. There was no mechanism for adding a ramp to it. And if you look at our fixed route buses now, we don't purchase any buses that don't have a ramp so that people are able to board with their mobility devices. On the paratransit side, all of our vehicles are lift equipped, and so we're able to board wheelchairs, scooters, and other mobility devices. So we've made huge strides in our vehicles. We've also made lots of improvements, although it's difficult, with our bus stops. And I hear this all the time. We have over 7,000 bus stops in our system. And we do what we can to make them accessible so that when you alight a bus, there's a concrete pad and you're able to navigate if you are in a mobility device. We are restricted lots of times with bus stops with limited right-of-way. A lot of our bus stops sit right in front of somebody's residence or right in front of a business. And so we do what we can to make them accessible, but we know we still have a long ways to go. The other big issue is that traditional paratransit service is costly. We have looked to partner with TNCs, and I'm really interested in your thoughts about that. We look to partner with TNCs, we look to partner with taxi. They don't always have accessible vehicles, which is a problem for us. We do have ambulatory passengers that can navigate in a taxi, but if we're going to offer a service, we want to be able to offer it to our entire riding population. And so it's been an avenue we've tried to pursue, but it's slow going. They just have not caught up with the accessibility factors that we need them to be compliant with in order to include them as part of our service. So that's one of our big barriers.
You know, I think something that, to build on that you talked about, is buying every new bus and making all of them accessible. That's something we've pushed for a lot of groups. Is accessibility is almost that universal design. It shouldn't be, we have a handful of special buses. It should be everything meets every requirement for every person around. Because you don't have that time to sit and wait around for that next bus to come around that usually then would have a broken lift. That's usually what happens when I fly into an airport and I'm trying to get the rental car bus to pick me up, is that they had one that had a ramp, and then usually that one was the one in maintenance. So seeing that move forward, where everything is, accessibility is built into everything, is key to where we're moving. In Austin, our paratransit system, it's sometimes a struggle because you have to call ahead so far in advance. And, you know, 1 to 3 days, a lot of times it makes it difficult when you're living a life. You're trying to get where you need to go. Doctor's appointments don't always stay the same. So making that connection is very difficult, and that's where we were excited about eventually moving towards using some of the technology that the TNCs have, with more of a flexible, dynamic scheduling, being able to see when the vehicle is coming on your phone so that you're not having to wait outside in the heat or the cold or the rain, and making it a little easier to not miss a ride. Some of their technology, I think, as we pair with different programs, can actually be a huge benefit. You're right, one of the biggest problems is they don't have very many accessible vehicles. That is part of what we pushed in the House Bill 100 when they were passing the law on making that statewide licensing, is looking at the new rules that just went into effect as of December 1st. All the new licenses that'll be issued to any of the TNCs, they have to do at least one accessibility pilot program in one of the 4 largest areas that they're working in. And that includes having wheelchair accessible vehicles, teaming up with other groups in the area to make sure they're offering some kind of service, and how they do that, and they're gonna have to report that back to the state. Part of the reason that this got passed like that is they wanted to try and incubate some of the new technologies and see what was the best way to be able to find resources to, you know, kind of apply the same standard across the state. But we really didn't know how it was going to work, because the way cabs were set up is you had a set number of cabs in the fleet, and you were able to say, well, for that set number, you have to have this many accessible vehicles. For TNCs, you may have 10,000 drivers out there, but you can't compare 10,000 drivers to 1,000 cabs, because cabs are used 24/7. And like, my wife signed up and she never did it. She just wanted to sign up to see how it worked. So we have to find a way to look at time. You know, when a person hits request, being able to get people served quickly and have that average time and wait period to be as short as possible, and build that way. And if we can build that, and I think that's even with, you know, buses, paratransit systems, is having this time set where you make that request and it's on demand, we can move forward, and I think people's lives will be a lot easier.
Tim, make a quick note, something that he said jarred something in my mind. So one of the things that we're trying at VIA too is, obviously technology helps us a lot. And technology can be great. It can be a great tool. What we discovered at VIA is that we were implementing technology that wasn't always accessible to everyone. And I think that the hardest part for us in our area is convincing the rest of the people on the team that just because it works for 80% of the population doesn't make it okay to go ahead and implement if it's not accessible for everyone. And technology is a strange thing. It can be wonderful, but you know, the issues that we have had with accessibility with technology, they seem to be issues that the technology companies have a hard time overcoming. Something as simple as, you know, the app can't read a drop-down menu, makes it very difficult for someone to use our app. So what good is the app if you can't put in your address? And so, you know, it was something that we were so excited about to roll out new technology, and it's going to do great things, and then we discovered it wasn't accessible, and, you know, now it's 6 months down the road. So changing the mindsets of other people and getting them to understand that if we're going to implement something, it should be accessible to everyone has been a challenge at times.
Yeah, I can say, just to add into that, working with some of these new technology companies, it's getting people in there that have any type of disability and helping them from the beginning. So this becomes part of their business plan. It doesn't become a secondary contract side of, well, we got to make it accessible, what do we need to do, and not understand accessibility at all. I think that's where it's so important that as a community, when we see these companies coming in, that we start participating and talking to them and saying, hey, as you develop this, let's not wait. Let's build this from the ground up. Because you're right, we've had some of the companies that are accessible to a screen reader, and then other ones who don't understand it at all. So there are those issues with technology. And
So why don't you talk about some of the new directions you're going with in accessibility and some of the promising strategies you see going forward?
Okay, so we had a workshop back in October. What we discovered on our team is that we had all these ideas, but we have to work within the regulations of the FTA, right, the Federal Transit Administration. And because we're funded federally, there's a lot of things that we can't just go forth and implement. We've got to make sure that we follow all of these rules. So we held a workshop back in October, and we invited transits from all over the country. We started with the Texas transits, and then we invited some other transits and just brainstormed, sat down and said, what are you doing to help curtail these costs, to provide more efficient service? And so I'll tell you about a couple of things that we're doing. So at VIA, we have a private contractor who provides part of the service. So we provide part of that paratransit service, and then we have an outside contractor that provides the other. The biggest complaint we get is timeliness of trips. And so one of the things that we're doing in 2018 is we are going to completely take over dispatching functions for the entire service. This allows us to kind of watch trips as we go, and so we're not finding out about late trips at the very last minute when they're already late, and then we're trying to put a fix on that. So we'll be taking over all of the dispatching functions early in 2018. We have been having discussions with Yellow Cab. They've been a great partner. The problem in the past was they didn't have as many accessible vehicles. When we talked to them about the possibility of using them for what we call our overflow trips, they've now committed to bring in more accessible vehicles dedicated to providing paratransit service for VIA. And I think you can speak to almost any of our riders, and they'll tell you they would love to take a Yellow Cab trip versus a shared ride Via Trans van trip, because they can get to their destination sooner. So we're working on developing that partnership for Yellow Cab. I think 2018 is going to bring a more fruitful partnership, and I think that they're going to do a great job at helping us to provide some of that overflow accommodation. We are putting out a new contract in 2018 for paratransit service. We're hoping, FTA is working with several transits around the country to develop a partnership with TNCs eventually. The other issue with TNCs, besides the accessible fleet, is that they have to follow all of the guidelines of FTA, and that means background checks, drug and alcohol screenings. There's a list of things that they have to comply with, and TNCs have not been as quick to come to the table with those things as a partner like Yellow Cab. But it's something that's being talked about all around the country. I think that in the next year or so, we're going to see some progress with TNCs, and we're hoping in the future to have a partnership with them to help provide some of this service as well.
I say one of the nice things about this is it's creating competition. And the one thing about that, you know, a lot of times the cab companies didn't all come to the table right away, and I think they're starting to see that we have to provide better service, we need to provide quicker service. And at the end of the day, if we can have multiple choices within a city, that only improves everything for all of us. Because I know it's even been a struggle in Austin. There are times when you call any of the cab companies and they may not have any in the fleet running. Well, they offer accessible fleet, but if none are in service at that time, there are no accessible services. So the more options that are out there, I think the better. And as we move forward and as the city-private contracts kind of build, that creates a bigger fleet for all of us, and I know that's always going to be a benefit.
I had a question. You mentioned federal regulations and you mentioned creating consistent systems, at least in Texas. This kind of moves toward what can the community do, but how much support do you get from the federal level in some respects? How you know, is there a system for accessibility coming down from the federal level that supports, say, what VIA's doing, or in your experience, what's happening with transportation in Austin or across Texas?
Well, I think something that we have to look at is there's almost different levels of groups. There's many people who are just looking for an accessible ride and willing and can pay cash at the time to take it. Kind of your private rides. Those who, you know, are riding on one of these systems and able to pay in through that way. So each one of those has different regulations, and I think it's going to be just building that competitive market on both sides and trying to benefit where we can. But I think it's a complex system.
I will use this opportunity since you asked the question. One of our constraints is budget. So we are funded partially by the federal government and partially from sales tax. And so VIA operates off of a 0.5 cent sales tax. All of the major transit systems in Texas receive a full cent to operate their public transit system. So we often get questions, Sylvia gets calls all the time about, you know, I live in this part of town, which is outside of our service area. Why doesn't VIA Trans provide service out here? We would love to be able to extend the service beyond where we're at. It costs money that we don't have. So when people ask, what can we do as community members to, you know, to support VIA, we say, have a conversation, talk to your council people, talk to your legislators. We run a very efficient system compared to all of the other major transits in Texas. And when you consider we are funded at half the level that they are and still provide, our demographic area that we serve is huge compared to some of the other systems. And so we do a great job at operating with what we have, but we are getting to that point where demand is higher, the need for it is greater, and we have no funding for accommodating that additional demand. I tell Sylvia all of the time, I don't envy her position. She is one of those people that is operating a system and she needs more resources and doesn't have them. And so every day we say, go forth and do with what you have, and she performs a small miracle every day and makes the service happen. We offer, I just had the numbers here, we're providing over 4,000 trips a day on the paratransit side, and that number is growing, and it's going to continue to grow. We need more vehicles, we need more manpower, we need more resources, and we simply don't have the money for it.
Yeah, I know in that last conversation we had, that 0.5 cent has totaled up to a lot of money over the years. Mm-hmm. And that's something, as a community, I strongly agree with you to be able to go forward. It's not often when you tell legislators you're willing to pay a little bit more in sales tax or in any tax, but if it's going to improve services across the board for everyone, it's worth telling them. Otherwise, all they hear is, I want taxes cut. So sometimes there's a trade-off there to make sure we have the right infrastructure, and it costs money.
So maybe talk a little more about, well, do you want to talk about your light rail project, and is VIA doing anything innovative with transportation that it can increase, like light rails? Or I'm from New York, so we had subways, which were not terribly, they were kind of terrifying when I lived there. Now they're much better. But you were going to talk about the design from the ground up. So
yes, so
and high-speed rail?
Yeah, so we were approached by Texas Central, and we've been talking with them. But high-speed rail is not light rail. It's a totally different system. It'd be the first one in the U.S., and it would run from Dallas to College Station to Houston in 90 minutes. It runs at about 205 miles an hour. The best part about it is that they really are designing the cabins to where you can roll in. The platform is completely accessible. There's no hump to jump over, no special equipment. There's multiple areas for you to sit. There are no, the bathrooms are actually fully ADA compliant. Being able to move between cars even at 200 miles an hour, and then getting to your destination and being able to access other transportation has been their goal. Pulling together stakeholder groups to talk about design. I mean, they're really looking at it from the very beginning. This is something that's starting to move forward already, and I think the good part about that is that they are adding transportation and really looking into this. For that reason, it gives us more options. Unlike flying, where most people flying between Dallas and Houston, if you're in a power chair, majority of people don't want to make that hop. It's too hard on our equipment. Most of the time you show up and something's broken, it's not worth that trip. So as we move forward in different options, I think that's an important consideration. For us in Austin, we have one rail line. I've never ridden it. Don't know many people who do. And we don't really have many other options in Austin. I know it's something that they've talked about doing more of, but trying to find something that everyone can use, we just really haven't expanded.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because one question I had for Rosa and for you as well. So paratransit's far more expensive. What are the benefits of people, say, with disabilities moving to normal transit? And is there any help or training or comfort? I visited England a summer ago, and it was and I have trouble standing, and I had never been somewhere where every time I went into a train, or bus, everyone leapt up and offered me their seat. And I spoke to someone and I said, for a minute I was self-conscious, like, do I suddenly look as if I'm about to fall down, which I never, but they had a big public awareness campaign about disability, and it was called, don't wait, please give up your seat. So it was almost like I walked in, it was like a musical, here, here, here. But it was very helpful to me.
Yes.
And I wondered about that. So
That's a great idea, actually. We should write that down and try that. So we would love for people to ride our fixed route system, and we've tried our best to make the fixed route system accessible. I talked a little bit about our vehicles. They all lean over and a ramp deploys so that people can board with mobility devices. We have most of our buses are equipped with 3 wheelchair securements, including one for an oversized wheelchair or a scooter. So we've made great progress with that. We call out stop announcements at major stops for to help people navigate the system. We do have a program, we call it travel training. Right now it's a partnership through ACOG, I believe. And so if someone comes to us and says, I want to be able to navigate the fixed route system, there's a bus stop close to my house, but I need help, I don't know how to ride the system, then we have a program set up where we can actually have someone train you how to ride the fixed route system. And whether that takes a day or a week or whatever it takes, we work with you to teach you schedules, teach you how to board and alight a bus, teach you about our rider rules. We work to make our stops accessible. Like I said, we've got some work to do still. We've got 7,000 stops in our system, and they're fairly costly to improve. And I'm talking about, $10,000 to $15,000 each to make them accessible. And I won't say most of the time, a lot of the time, we do all of this work to make the bus stop accessible, but there are no accessible sidewalks leading to wherever for their path of travel. And so part of it is our responsibility, part of it is on the city of San Antonio, to make those paths of travel accessible. But we try to identify those individuals through our eligibility process. So when you come in and apply for eligibility for paratransit, David's team will take an application, they'll ask you some questions, and if they can identify an individual who's got maybe some minor obstacles but is capable of riding a fixed route system, then they're identified, and we recommend that they go through the travel training program. Obviously, fixed route allows you much more flexibility and freedom, where you can travel, just about anywhere our fixed route system goes. We are working on putting in a couple of lines where buses will be passing through every 10 minutes. So you don't even have to look at a schedule. You know a bus is going to come through every 10 minutes. So we're trying to do that on some of our major corridors on our fixed route system. But I really like that idea, and one of the things on our fixed route is we have priority seating for people with disabilities. Unfortunately, sometimes people sit in it and we ask them, will you please give up your seat? And sometimes they don't, and we can't force them. And so I love that idea of doing an awareness campaign, so that would be a dream come true for us. If somebody walked on the bus and everybody jumped up and
Yeah,
said, hey,
no, I was,
have my seat, that would be
I
awesome.
think they'd had good ads, but it was great. I mean, it was
Yeah.
kind of extraordinary. I
Yeah.
realized the power of something like that. Well, this has been lovely, but now I want to open it up to all of you. I've been standing with my back to you kind of awkwardly at this microphone. I think, have people passing forward questions? Are we walking? Oh, you can come on up to the mic and ask a question, and they will answer.
I would like VIA to encourage bus etiquette. The people have to get off the bus first before you get on. The bus driver controls the entire bus. A lot of them are very passive. There's a lot of noise going on, and they let it go. Misbehavior. So the bus driver has to be stronger or better trained, etc. I end up yelling because his father and mother let their kids run rampant all over the place, and that's wrong.
Yes.
And I believe children should be seen, not heard, in that setting.
I appreciate that comment, and we just had a workshop on Saturday, and we had a similar comment. So VIA employs about 1,000 fixed route drivers, and Sylvia's got another maybe 200 or so paratransit drivers, and they all go through the same training. We teach them. They go through sensitivity training, customer service training, and I would love to say that all 1,200 of them are going to do things right every single time. Unfortunately, there are times that we have issues that way. What I tell everyone is, if you ever have a bad experience on VIA or a bad experience with an operator, please let us know. There are like 10 cameras on every bus, and so your complaint is not falling on deaf ears. We have a very detailed system, that meticulously researches every complaint that comes through. We will pull video, we will talk to the driver, we will get down to the bottom of what happened, and we will correct the behavior. But we need to know about it. If we don't know about it, there's nothing that we can do. So please, if you ever have any bad experiences, feel free to give us a call, and we will absolutely turn around and correct that behavior.
What is the name of that new app that VIA has, where you can actually, it'll tell you how far away the bus is?
Yes, thank you. And it's good to see some familiar faces here. So we haven't formally launched it yet, but we have technology coming. We call it BOSS. It's going to be the ViaTrans online system. Is that
The city bus. They said it was attached to the city, the bus stops,
attached to the bus stops?
the beacons.
Beacon.
Yeah,
Oh, are they talking about Go Mobile?
It's some sort of app where it could tell you how far away the bus is, what bus is coming to you.
Okay. I know a little bit about it because I don't think we formally launched that either, right? We have? Ah, okay. Okay. Well, when I don't know something, I always say, I will definitely get back to you and find out why I don't have that information.
Well, and that kind of information, I think when we talk to TNCs, for many people, having that in your hand, it helps you know exactly what's going on, control your own setting in your life. So technology and that like that makes everything work.
Hello. Okay. Hello. This is mainly for VIA.
Yes, ma'am.
I do both. I ride paratransit and the fixed route.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay. It makes it easier. I know it's a cost of paratransit, so I try to use the fixed route more.
Thank you.
But the transit is very good for when you have like appointments and so forth.
Sure.
My thing is this. On your fixed routes, especially for the blind, a lot of the drivers do not turn on the talking.
Stop announcements.
Yes. So you're lost.
Okay.
Even when the bus pulls up to you, it doesn't announce which bus it is.
Okay.
Now, a lot of them know me, so they'll tell me which bus it is, and I don't need y'all today. But they have to understand, especially with the blind, if we cannot hear the bus or hear our announcements, we need to be able to get on and off without having to trouble everybody in the area or trouble the bus driver.
Right.
So if they can do this, and if they can. Also too, I noticed you said sensitivity training on your drivers. Not so much the fixed route, but the paratransit. There are some that need a lot more training. They unfortunately, one, they do not know how to approach you in terms of guidance, or they sit up there and they figure, oh, well, it's curb to curb, we don't need to assist you. And if you're walking off of a curb or walking from someplace where you're not sure of, yes, we do use our canes as guidance, but it's not always going to tell us everything. And you can end up falling.
Sure.
When it comes in terms of sensitivity, they really need I think a more thorough training, more in depth, so that they can understand their different types, and they have to look at everybody and realize what they're doing.
Yes, ma'am. I thank you again for your comments. And you're right, they go through sensitivity training. We try to do refresher courses every couple of years just to kind of keep it fresh in their minds. But, again, anytime that an operator is not doing what they're supposed to, please give us a call. Those stop announcements are on the bus for a reason. It's not just technology that we paid for so that it's not being used. It must be used. That's part of the equipment on the bus, and it needs to be in use at all times. So if you're ever on a bus and those stop announcements are not being used, please report that to us. We can go back and, again, check the video, check the audio, and discipline that operator accordingly.
One thing we've done in the past with other groups is experiential training, kind of like what this School for the Blind does, where they will actually, basically put a person who has no visual issues, and we'll put some of the different kinds of blinders on and, hand them a cane. And sometimes getting thrown into that, or being, we used to do it with wheelchairs with physical therapists to let them see how that works. It's a totally different game than when you're just hearing it. So that's always something that can.
So one of the things that DisAbilitySA promotes is working together as a community, and not just in individual sectors, whether you have intellectual and developmental disabilities or physical disabilities or sensory disabilities or mental health issues, but everybody collaboratively working together to make our community better as a whole. And so to piggyback off of what Rosa was saying, if the talking device is not on a bus, whether you need that technology or not, report it. Even if it's not beneficial for you individually, if you're on a bus and the talking apparatus is not on, report it, because you don't know who else you might be helping. So advocate for one another, and let's help make it a better experience for everyone.
Okay, got it. My question is in regards to the technology that you're trying to implement, the apps specifically.
Yes, sir.
What process do you go through to ensure that those apps are accessible? Like what means do you do to test those things out, specifically for someone who's blind or visually impaired?
Yes. So I can tell you from experience what was done in the past and what's going to be done in the future. So in the past, we have contracted with a technology company. They roll out their product, and we have taken the initiative because we employ some people with disabilities and we specifically have a young lady in our reservations department who is sight impaired, and we say, hey, can you test it, for us and tell us what issues you have. The technology company did very little to help us through that process. When we approached the technology company and told them we will not launch this product until it is accessible for everyone, now they are employing a third party to come in and test the application for accessibility features. So now they gave us a 3-page report of all of the features that they are going to contract with somebody to test on that application, which leads me back to my point before. I don't think the technology companies right now it's not a major focus for them. I think they feel if it works for 85% of the population, then it should be okay. It's not until the customer, us, gets involved and says, we're not going to move forward with that product until it's accessible, that they've decided now to follow some testings to go through and test all of those accessibility features. David back there is actually pushing for our agency to adopt a policy that says we will not move forward with any new technology unless it is accessible for everyone. And so we're actually working on that right now.
I work for Northside School District and at the Nellie Reddick Center, and we've had a phenomenal relationship so far with Via Trans as we try to transition young adults from
Yes, you do. I've
post
read
high
a lot
school
about
on
the
out.
program.
And we've had a phenomenal relationship. We've had a few challenges, and one of those is everything outside of 1604.
Yeah.
And then the second question I have is about the sensitivity training for the yellow cap, because we have had incidents
Yes.
where they've been less than kind and less than compassionate
Yes.
with the individuals we serve. So I guess finding out what that is going forward
Yes.
as well.
Yes,
Um,
I'll answer the yellow cab question first. And by the way, thank you for that partnership. I think they even highlighted it in, we've been putting some videos together for,
Correct.
yeah, and they highlighted, your program. It's been great. On the yellow cab side, traditionally how we've used yellow cab is kind of last minute trips. And so we've never had a dedicated population of drivers that have been put aside for VIA. And so the trips were given to whatever driver was out there and closest to the trip. And so they had standard training, but maybe not the focused training that we would have liked. Now, moving forward with Yellow Cab, because of the increase in the amount of trips we're giving them, one of the stipulations for that is we want dedicated drivers that have the same training that our Via Trans drivers have. So I think you're going to see that Yellow Cab is going to place a bigger emphasis on sensitivity training. They're getting the same training that our Via Trans drivers are getting. So hopefully, and if you haven't already, hopefully you're going to start to see an improvement in how those Yellow Cab drivers are assisting the people that they're picking up. And that's just part of the agreement is if you want our business, you need to have the same training that our drivers have. The first part of your question was about,
Beyond 1604.
Oh.
Everything up to that, though, I will tell you, we've just had a
Yes.
great experience, and so have our young adults that are transitioning out. As a matter of fact, today, we had a driver that was dropping off an individual training at HEB at Days of All on I-10, and that young adult left their cell phone. Before they got out to the freeway, realized that the phone was on the Via Trans. That person doubled back and brought it back.
See,
into
I love
the
to
store.
hear things like that.
And it was amazing. And we realized
Yes.
that can't always happen. And we have had to go down a time or two to the
Yes.
lost account. And not a problem, but I mean, that kind of detail to their thinking.
Yes.
That was amazing.
absolutely.
Concern going forward, these same individuals, if they're outside of 1604, it makes it more difficult to travel train.
Right.
And even if somebody can bring them inside 1604, the reality in the real world application is, what are we going to do when they're ready to be employed and it's outside 1604?
Right. So, Sylvia, can you just talk a little bit about the service area that's expanding in 2018? And I wish I could tell you it's expanding by leaps and bounds, but it's not. But
There's a small sliver going up Huebner to Blanco up to Stone Oak. When the Stone Oak Park and Ride opens, it'll go up the TPC Parkway, just a little bit past 281. So it's going to be in that area. It's not a big area, but it's going to cover some of Stone Oak. So yeah, it's not further than Evans Road, but it does help a little bit. I'm not sure where that ranch is, but if it's past, I can see the map, Huebner going up to Stone Oak and then to TPC, I think it is. Right, that side of it. Yeah, that's not in the area. It's just a small sliver that they're adding because of the Stone Oak Parkway.
And so I can tell you, the way that our service area expands for ViaTrans is that the fixed route system has to expand. So as we expand our fixed route system, because remember, paratransit service is complementary to the fixed route service. So if we have no fixed route service in an area, then there will be no paratransit service. So the key to getting service out there is expanding fixed route service. And I do believe that as the areas grow, and as the demand grows in that area, eventually fixed route will have to find its way over. And then as fixed route grows, paratransit will grow also. But that's why we grow so slowly on the paratransit side, is because it follows the fixed route. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, sales tax money. we need
So
it.
probably early 2018 is when that's going to happen. I think somebody asked that question.
Yes.
So, but-
Yes, around February. If we had more funding. Yay.
I have several issues to bring up, and I'm sorry, I have a larynx issue.
That's okay.
One is, when it comes to airline travel, it is not under the ADA, it's under the ACAA. In particular, when it comes to service dogs, they have a separate policy for psychiatric service dogs. Under the ADA, service dog is a service dog is a service dog. Under the ACAA, a psychiatric service dog is demoted to the level of an emotional support animal. So those with a psychiatric service dog have to bring an amazingly amount of documentation, including a letter from your doctor dated within 30 days of your flight, that you have this service dog. To me, this is totally discriminatory against a subset of people with disabilities. I am autistic. Technically, it's kind of a washy area. Is this psychiatric? Is this neurological? My trainer calls ahead of time to work everything out when it comes to flying, but even if it doesn't, I don't have to for that trip. This should not be happening, where a section of our population is being discriminated against, being stigmatized, and being treated like their disability is not important, and they don't have access. And you can have trouble in the airline and end up having to pay money to have your service dog travel or having to put your service dog in with the luggage in order to have your dog travel with you. This is not appropriate. This should not be happening. And I know it's not the city, but it's something that I face every time I travel.
Yeah, and that's an area where there's a lot of discussion going on. It's not something I've personally worked on, and I can't get into the nuts and bolts of it, but I can get your information afterwards and try and get you connected to someone who is. But I know that is an area where they're trying to figure out how to get the wording right so that people who need it are getting the access, and then those who may be trying to abuse it. Because it's like, it comes down to anything, accessible parking. The amount of abuse that's there, I think they're trying to figure out ways to do it, to make sure people are getting the right access, but also not allowing it to be abused. So I'll try and get you in contact with someone who can talk more with you about it.
And as far as locally, I have Via Trans, but I use both depending on, I have larynx and breathing issues in addition, and walking issues. But one of the problems I have, because I have a larynx issue, I never know moment to moment if I'm going to have a voice. And so calling to set the ride up can be difficult, especially when it comes if I need a taxi service where I have to use my cell phone. And if my voice is completely gone, it's very difficult for me to utilize the service. I'm not hearing impaired, but my voice will completely leave. And so this is an issue that I'm having that I don't know how to fix so that I can be able to get what I need. And then what was brought up with the front seat, there's been numerous times that I've had to go all the way in the back and go up the stairs just to get a seat. And when I first get on, it's obvious I'm staggering, I have a service dog, and yet many times people are right there and nobody will give up the seat. I will give up a seat to somebody that needs it more than I do, but there's times I'm all the way in the back. And another thing that is the sidewalks, like especially the trash cans. Some people, will leave it there just for the pickup day, but other people leave their trash cans out all week long. And I have balance issues and walking issues, so every time I have to go like off the sidewalk and to the road, there's that chance that I'm gonna fall. And so it's difficult to use the fixed route sometimes if I'm having a really bad day, because I'm gonna have to navigate around these things, and it's difficult.
So and I started to talk about the app earlier. Apparently I was talking about the wrong app. But eventually, I think our VOS application is going to work for you. So our VIA online reservation system is going to allow you to use your smartphone, a computer, something to make your reservations online. So it's an online reservation system, and so that will be able to help you whenever you're not able to actually make a phone call. And so we're very close. We were going to roll it out in December when we found out we had some accessibility issues, and so that rollout has been pushed back to probably February or March. But we will definitely keep you informed, because I think you'll find that application very, very useful.
You know, and some of the TNCs were actually working on some of for the deaf community, the ability, even for some of the deaf drivers, to be able to text back and forth, so that it was all being done through text. And that might be something that could be expanded into a similar situation.
What is TNC?
Transportation network company. So let's say Uber, Lyft, all of those groups, yeah.
Okay.
And many others that are popping up.
Okay. Thank you.
You got it.
Hi.
Hi.
You've actually already answered my question with the lovely lady that was just up here on the reservations for Via Trans being made online. But since I was already in line, I figured I might as well come up to the mic. Because I would like to say that I work with special needs individuals, 18 to 22, in a transition program for Alamo Heights. My coworkers over there as well. But one of the things that we have found is when we're making the reservations, because we do train our students to make their own reservations so that they can achieve the greatest level of independence that they possibly can and not rely on everybody around them. But I do notice that there is a lot of impatience on the phones with making the reservations. We have one student in particular who has a very severe stutter, which was the reason I was going to ask about the online reservations. But it's happened on more than one occasion where he's trying to get the first words out and the operator doesn't hear him say anything because he hasn't yet and hangs up. And that's been a recurring issue. And it also happens because when we're working with our other students because all of our students have intellectual disabilities, and so sometimes when they are asked a question, it takes them several seconds, even more, to comprehend and then come up with their answer to that question. And it's happened on those occasions too where we've been hung up on because, oh, they're not hearing a response soon enough. And so I just, since I was up here, wanted to bring that to your attention.
Yeah, so I think the VIA online reservation system is going to be very useful for you too, but just like the fixed route system, so one of the things that we do is all of the conversations, all those phone conversations are recorded. And so if anyone ever has an issue with the reservation agent where maybe the reservationist is being impatient or is not providing good customer service, we ask that you call those complaints in, because Sylvia can go back and listen to that conversation, and then we can coach and counsel based on what we hear. Again, the population that we serve, we expect our employees to have lots of patience and to be compassionate and to be understanding, and so there should never be an issue with us being rude to anybody on the phone or being impatient and hanging up. So if that happens again, please let us know. We can certainly go back and again correct that behavior. But I think everyone is really going to like VOS when we get it launched. It's going to have the ability to make reservations. You'll also have the ability to track your vehicle so that you can see when it's coming. It's going to be a great application once we can get it to be accessible for everyone.
Real quick follow-up. Will it also have capabilities for making group reservations or companion reservations? Not groups?
Yes. Oh, so the VOS application will have the ability for you to book a trip for your companion, but not group reservations.
Hello, I'm from Reddix as well with Barbara back there. And so my question, well, first I wanted to say that I come from an area outside of San Antonio where we didn't have transit outside of Houston. And I truly appreciate what VIA does here because I know it's a big job. So I just want to say thank you for that. My question is not so much for VIA, but it's just a general question. My father is in a wheelchair, and so parking-wise, I know we kind of mentioned that earlier, but it is a struggle for us to, because he has to have the ramp come out of his van, and then the space on top of that to get out. People are constantly, either the space isn't big enough or it's really difficult to have enough room for him to be able to get in and out safely. And I have another friend who has the same issue. So I was just curious if you had seen that in any other places in the state or what you might have seen being done to try to help that.
Accessible parking is one of the biggest issues and concerns I get calls about. We've worked with a lot of groups on this. We've worked with the legislators trying to improve it. It's enforcement. It comes down to enforcement. I don't know if it's the same here in San Antonio, but Austin, if you have a placard, you can park at any meter for free, which makes those worth a lot of money to people. So then once they have them, they end up seeing an accessible parking space and they pull into them. We have a lot of issues with motorcycles and scooters in Austin that use the crosshatch, the loading area and unloading area a lot. And I've been working with a group, Parking Mobility, that's in Travis County and Hayes County. It was created by people with disabilities. It's an app. Apps are big tonight. But it allows you to take 3 pictures of the violation after you've gone through a training and you've been deputized. And once you take those 3 pictures, you walk away. You're able to fill out the rest of the information, and that gets sent to the county or the city, and they're able then to write the ticket. So it works really well for blocking issues. which basically that's what it is, because people don't realize when they park a foot over onto those lines, that when that ramp lowers down, once you get to the end of that ramp with that power chair or manual chair, you can't turn. For me, I drive a truck, and I have a crane that swings my chair around, which I need just about as much room. In Austin, we've seen the city is actually removing a lot of the downtown accessible parking. They've gone to making secure bike lanes, and to do that, they've had to remove a lot of the accessible parking, so we have even more issues trying to find a space that's safe to park. But yes, it's a growing problem. It's something that we're actually going to try and work with legislators this next legislative session to tighten up the rules on how many people can get placards, how accessible parking is looked at, because we're not going to ever gain more parking spots, even though we're an aging society and there are more placards out there than ever. But also looking at ways to encourage enforcement, and not just by giving someone a fine, more in the education part, creating a defensive driving. That's what we've found is the most valuable, is almost having someone go through this class that's been created. It's online, it's about 90 minutes, and usually by the time they get done, they finally understand why they can't just use a family member's placard. We actually had 2 people that, after they'd gotten tickets, decided to become volunteers to work in the program. So we're trying to expand that across the state, but it's been difficult working with different cities and counties because they each have their political view on it. But what we need is people from the San Antonio area to talk to their city council members and say they want something done, and we'll help you provide a solution to do it.
Thank you.
You got it.
This is for Via. I want to thank you for the new phone app. I still haven't learned how to use it, and it's driving me mad. But my concern is that, like, when I catch the 75 West Commerce bus to go to the HEB where I can find everything, there's usually fights on that bus. And it happens when the checks come in the first month. And most of the time I'm at the back section of the bus where it's up, so the walker has to get folded out. And then the older people that are much older than myself, they will not fold up their carts, and they'll just sit there and just like, you can't move them. It's like dead rock. And then people crowd around the driver. Even though they're behind the yellow line, they'll block, and they can't you can't get on or off, and it gets difficult. Another one of my issues is at the bus stops. I know there's a city ordinance of $200 if you caught smoking within inside of that 200 feet range or the 20 feet range. But still, even if it's bad weather or the sun is too bright, people will congregate there at the bus stop and take up the space. They'll see people with walkers or the wheelchairs, and they won't let them get close to the bus stop or to the benches that are there available. So that's another little issue.
You've just described my day in public transportation. So, go ahead, I'm sorry.
On Sunday mornings at 5:30, I'm over here at Guadalupe and Flores to catch a bus, which means I have to get the 44 or the 43 over to Travis Park, and then catch the 90 to get to church by 7. And that's dangerous because the homeless are there lining up to go to breakfast at Travis Park Methodist Church. And these people are violently nuts, and there's no security around, and you're just there like, oh, please don't let it be the day. You know, I can't take it. And it's making me more and more afraid to come out. And I'm not at the point, I've already lost one wheelchair, a power one, and the VA is not going to replace it because it was under the 4-year period. So when I did have the chair, it was an issue like, oh, well, there's too many people on board and I can't take you. Or because people with the little shopping carts and all this other fun stuff, they wouldn't give up the seats so we could get the chair on. And then, you end up having to wait till the next one. Well, then that's still another you know, the daily doubles of the
Right.
Wincy 2-for-1 specials, is where
Right.
everybody's on there.
Right.
And, you know, I just want to know, how is it going to get addressed? 'Cause
Yes, so you brought up, a myriad of issues that I face on a daily basis. So one of the things that VIA has been focusing on is safety, right? Safety for our riders. Just nationally, there's a trend in, you'd be surprised, there's a trend in operator assaults. And, I don't know what it is. It seems like the summer months are even worse. There's just people that get on the bus and they're upset and they want to take their frustration out on somebody. So one of the things that we're doing is trying to increase, we do have transit police officers, we have a chief of police, and we have transit police officers that work for VIA. They are a limited number. When you consider the 7,000 bus stops in our service system and the number of routes and the number of buses, we don't have an officer on every single bus. But what we do is coordinate with SAPD, with Bexar County, and so we try to at least cover the major transit systems. We also have armed security guards. We have a contract for security. So we try to put our presence out there as much as we can. Obviously, we can't be everywhere all the time, but it is a focus for future years. We are adding police officers every budget year. I think our director of safety and security was awarded like an additional 5 officers for 2018. So every year we add more officers in hopes to keep the system safe. One of the issues with priority seating is that you can ask people to make room for mobility devices, but we don't know that the person sitting there doesn't have a disability, themselves. We don't ask people what your disability is, and so you can politely ask them, but, we can't pick them up and force them to move. One of the issues that we are starting to see is there was a time when buses only had 1 wheelchair securement, and then we added another, and now we have 3 wheelchair securements, and there are still times that they are all full. There's a wheelchair in every single securement, and you're right, if you're in a mobility device, we can't board you and you have to wait for the next bus. We tell operators as a good practice, if you're leaving a wheelchair behind, call it in to dispatch so that if the next bus is an hour away, we can send a supervisor out there so that person isn't waiting for an hour for the next bus. If the next bus is 10 minutes away, then kindly let the person know that there'll be another bus coming in 10 minutes. But, that's something that, nationally we're going to start to look at, because we thought three wheelchair securements was enough, and we're starting to see increasingly that more and more people are, in mobility devices and they're riding our fixed route system. So no easy answers to any of that.
Just the last thing that I wanted to address was that when the buses are pulling up, the overhead lighting that states which bus it is,
Yes.
most of the time they don't put the bright on so you can see it.
Oh, okay.
Because of the glare factor, you don't see just the name or the designated bus.
Okay.
And, and sometimes you end up missing bus because you don't see it in time to catch it because the bright light overhead isn't on.
Okay. That's something that's easily fixed.
That's a fixable, right?
Yes, that's an easy fix. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Melanie and everybody here for participating and showing up. I don't envy your job, Rose. There's a lot of issues with VIA. I'm living here 14 years now from New York. I moved here because my grandson was born here. If he was born in Wyoming, I'd be in Laramie. What I'm trying to tell you is we get off buses, and as soon as my feet hits the concrete, the bus I want to get onto takes off. There has to be a system where they wait there. They will make up their time by going past empty bus stops. They have to park closer to the curb. I'm a huge advocate for seniors. I just turned 77 on Saturday, and I know what they feel. We don't want to stretch. You don't have to have a disability device to be considered, you could have a back spasm or whatever the deal is. They're not sensitive enough. They have to be trained and retrained. And there was a guy yesterday, he was no youngster. I told him he should turn in his retirement papers because he was very insensitive to seniors. I said, why didn't you lower the bus? Oh, it'll take too long. But if I go to a bus and I say, excuse me, I just want to get a schedule, that's the same amount of time. Or I stop the bus, I just have a question to ask. There was a woman that approached me on Facebook, and she says, I know Leroy Alloway, and I know Richard Gambita. I said, I know them both, and I know more about transportation than the both of them put together. And then she poses a question, what if I want to get off at an empty bus stop? Obviously, she's not a rider. You ring the bell. So she got very insulted. I think she unfriended me. But that's one of the hazards of
Yes.
Facebook.
Yes.
But they have to be more sensitive.
Yes.
Seniors are a very tough lot, but they can only take so much.
Yes.
And if you address simple issues like let them wait, you should see the anguish on people's faces when they get off a bus. The bus just took off. I mean, that's been going on. And I explained this to Keith, and I explained it to Jeff, and yet it's still going on. Maybe since you came aboard, you're around 7 months, maybe you could do something, but that's got to stop. Thank you.
No, I would say one thing on that, just to follow up quickly, is something that I've found when we ask people to report issues is, and I don't know if y'all do this or are able to, is to follow back up with them and let them know, because that makes a big difference in someone's life.
So Sheila's asking about if there's advisory committees or committees that work with VIA to follow up on issues.
Yes, we do, and thank you for asking that. So we actually have an advisory committee for accessible transportation, and we actually have a few vacancies on that committee. So if anyone is interested in participating or serving on that committee, I've got some cards up here. I'll gladly give you my information, and we would welcome you on the committee.
Okay, we're going to take one more question comment, and then we're going to break into small groups, and I will explain, or Sheila will explain what those, one of us will, are following this last comment.
Just want to get granular for a moment with VIA, because with your respect to accessibility of bus stops.
Yes.
I moved to the east side a little over a year ago, and at the intersection of Commerce and New Braunfels, on the northwest corner, there is a bus stop. That's the southbound bus stop that goes on New Braunfels. There are no curb cuts, and regularly going through that intersection, I have seen people in power chairs, having people coming from the bus stop across the street to help them get up on the curb. I've seen elderly people in chairs with, like, a grandmother with a grandson trying to lift her up onto the curb. Part of the problem is that corner is the city cemeteries. Now, dead people, I mean, frankly, let's move the dead people a little bit. But there should be, I mean, that is a really serious, that's a very regularly used bus stop. It's a major bus stop, and it really needs to be, I've talked to now 2 city council persons, one VIA executive about this problem, and nobody's addressing it. And it's a safety hazard, it's an accessibility hazard, and VIA really needs to take a look at that, VIA and the city together, to make that an accessible stop, because it is a serious problem particularly for the east side, because, you know, the people on the east side don't have the resources and they rely on VIA to get around, and it's a matter of time before somebody's going to really get hurt badly there.
So you said Commerce and New Braunfels, the southbound
It's the north, yeah, it's actually it is the northwest corner of Commerce and New Braunfels. So it's the corner, it'll be the corner where the city cemetery, it'll be the southbound route, but it'll be the corner where the city cemetery is located.
We can send somebody to go check that out in the morning.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Okay. I'm gonna enlist you to help us travel train.
So a lot of the conversation, I think, or some of the conversation, especially with this last one, talked about bus stop, sidewalk, curb accessibility. I represent the Disability Access Office with the City of San Antonio. We do partner with VIA a lot to try to coordinate our projects so our bus stops and curbs get accessible at the same time. But if you have a concern or a complaint about a sidewalk, you're always welcome to call our office about that and let us know, and I'll make sure I give you my card afterwards. But we're the Disability Access Office with the City of San Antonio. You can email us at disabilityaccess@sanantonio.gov. The 311 app, other than I know that they're getting a new system soon, but I don't know anything else.
Does anybody here use the 311 app to report accessibility issues? You do? Can you come talk about it just really quick in case there are some people here or out in Nowcast land who would like?
So the 311 app, it's actually very convenient. You can submit pictures. You can kind of send a little text if you see some kind of issue with any kind of infrastructure, sidewalks, accessibility issues, anything like that. Potholes especially, that's kind of very popular. Yeah, you just download the San Antonio, I think it's just called the San Antonio 311 app. You can always just call 311 also, and they'll put your complaint in there. So. The right department.
Hi, I'm Darcy Chapoul with the Texas Department of Transportation, and again, I deal with our ADA accessibility here in the San Antonio district, which covers 12 counties. And we partner really closely with VIA too to try and ensure that those bus stops are accessible. So I look forward to the conversation in the small groups later about that.
Is there anybody else here with an organization that works with transportation that would just like to identify themselves in case other people would like to talk to you as well? And then we're going to break up into our small groups. But if you work with an organization and want people to know who you are and what resource you provide in the community, please just come up and very briefly introduce yourself.
I'm the founder and executive director of SAS. It doesn't exist yet because we don't have the funding. It stands for San Antonio Senior Shopper Shuttle. This is a free service, going to be door to door. It's run by veterans. It's a non-for-profit, registered with the county, the state, etc. Okay? It's going to cost millions of dollars. Where am I going to get this money? From the same guys that gave us the soccer fields up on Thousand Oaks. The city gave $9 million, and the county gave $9 million. That's how we're going to do this. It takes millions of dollars to do this. We're going to divide the county into 4 quadrants and put 2 buses in each one. Here's what happens. We're giving veterans jobs, seniors mobility, and it's a boost for the retail economy. It is going to be free, it's wheelchair accessible, and it's door to door. If you want my card, you can read the website and you'll know more about it. I've been riding VIA for 14 years. And let me tell you, I don't envy you, Rose. You got a big job ahead of you. There's a lot to be fixed.
Turn that around. I'm Alex Carroll again. I'm the active transportation planner for the Alamo Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. Just wanted to make a forum known to you all in addition to VIA's committee. We also have 2 committees that are always open to the public and a really good forum for delivering complaints or providing feedback. We have a bicycle mobility advisory committee and a pedestrian mobility advisory committee. Again, those are always open to the public, and both committees include membership from the Texas Department of Transportation, the City of San Antonio, Bexar County, VIA, and a lot of other agencies. And so if you want to come to kind of a one-stop shop, you can do that. This is all just to say that there are lots of resources out there and places to go if you do have an issue And if you come to our committee meetings, or if you contact me or anybody else who has already spoken, we can always get you to the right person and make sure that your complaint or your issue is heard. BMAC, the bicycle committee, meets the second Wednesday of each month, and PMAC, our pedestrian committee, meets the third Wednesday of each month. So that's just another resource out there, another place to go with any issues or concerns you may have.
Well, thank you for all those great questions. We're going to break now into small group discussions, and you have some choices here. Alex, who is just up here, Alex Carroll, wave, Alex. With the Alamo Area MPO, we'll be hosting a small group discussion on accessible transit service, i.e., does regular bus service come to your neighborhood? How is paratransit service like Via Trans working for the community? And bus stop accessibility, i.e., does sidewalks connect to the bus stops? Is there room in the landing pad for people in wheelchairs to board the bus? Are there curb ramps? Choice number 2 is Chase Bearden with the Coalition for Texans with Disabilities is going to host a discussion on accessible parking, which was an area we didn't get to cover perhaps as completely as we wanted. And last of all, David Guajardo is going to talk about navigating the transportation system as a visually impaired or blind person. I think that's going to be really interesting. So, Melanie, do we have any places people should go for this small group conversations, or we just...
We'll do it as people are sitting. So Michael, raise your hand, is right up here. So if you would like to participate in that discussion, please gather around him. Alex is in the back, so we'll put her right in this back section, and then this sofa and these chairs up here, Chase will be talking about parking accessibility. And these individuals are looking for feedback in the discussions, many of them, so please feel free to vocalize your experience and participate in these small group discussions. Thank you. And if you're not participating in a small group discussion, we do have our exhibitors in the back, so feel free to visit with them some more. And please, if you're leaving, leave your surveys, completed surveys, as well as your question comment cards so that we can continue the discussion. Thank you.